So here we are. It's the week after Easter. And we spent a lot of time talking about Jesus last week, which is really appropriate because that's what Easter's all about. But we don't get to talk a lot about Jesus at Easter time. And it feels like to me almost every year the right thing to do after Easter is to spend some time talking about Jesus. To spend some time digging in a little bit. You know, because in my experience, there's lots of different ideas about who Jesus is and what he said and how he lived and how he would call us to live. And we've got some thoughts and ideas about that to share with people. And we think maybe one of the best ways to do that is just to, check the source and let Jesus speak for himself. So over the next 4 weeks, you're going to hear us tackle 4 different passages of Scripture in which Jesus says something like, I am... ... He identifies himself. And today we're going to start with something that you might have thought we might preach last weekend, which is, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And it's funny because I think that if you're here, you have a conception that Christianity makes a claim that those who are faithful to Jesus will have life after death. Yes? Is that shocking to anyone? Is that the first time you've ever heard that? No. Fantastic. Okay, good, because I'm not going to talk about that part of it a whole lot this morning. Because I think the story that happens around this statement is really important. And if we understand that Jesus meant, on one hand, that when he said, I am resurrection, that there is hope for a life after this one in community with God, what else was he saying? I am the resurrection and the life. I think a lot of what we're going to explore this morning has more to do with what Jesus might have meant by saying, and the life. You know, because I suppose we could read that and think that it means, you know, I am resurrection and life, like he's being redundant, you know, like he's saying something twice in a row. But I don't think that's actually what he's doing here. When you look at the passage, there seems to be more going on. So let's read a little bit together. And let's try and mine out this thing that Jesus said about himself and what he might have been trying to teach as he taught them, I am the resurrection and the life. We're going to be in John chapter 11, and we're going to start at verse 1. If you have your Bible, digital or analog or otherwise, you can pull it out. If not, that's okay. We're going to put everything up on the screen. Here's what it says. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus was now sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. And when he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. Which is a really odd thing because here's what happened. In chapter 10, Jesus is making some claims in Jerusalem, and the claims that he makes make people so upset that they're ready to kill Jesus. But it's not time for Jesus to die yet, so he beats it. And he goes across the Jordan, presumably to Bethany. Okay, so when Mary and Martha of Bethany meet Jesus, he's already close by. And it says, because Jesus loved them, he left. Which seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? Doesn't it like, hey, I really need, the way that I thought about this earlier was like, you know, guys, maybe this is on my mind because there's been lots of pregnancy talk around the office these days. But like, okay, so a wife comes to a husband and says, my water broke. And he's like, awesome, let's go to the guitar store and pick up a new guitar. It seems like not the helpful thing to do. That maybe is what I would do. But it doesn't seem like the helpful thing to do because Jesus is like, you know, hey, your friends need you. That's cool. I'm going to walk 2 miles this way to Jerusalem and spend 2 days there. See what's going on here? It's really strange. Why does it say that so, because Jesus loved them, he left? That's what it says, right? Verse 6, verse 5. Now Jesus loved Mary and her sister and Lazarus. So, because he loved them, he stayed where he was 2 more days. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? See, this passage uses the word love in 2 different ways. And forgive me if you've heard this before, but the Bible, when it says love, you have to dig in and figure out which love it's talking about, okay? And there are several different Greek words that are translated love in English, but they're different words in Greek. So, when it says that, so the sisters sent word to Jesus, this is verse 3, Lord, the one you love is sick. What kind of love was it talking about? It was talking about friendship, brotherly love, philios, right? This was a brotherly love. Like, Jesus, your friend is dying, come and help. But when it says, so now Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, it uses that special word agape, which is talking about a holy love. And so Jesus' intention when he says so, he's going to stay where he is 2 more days. What it means is that because Jesus wanted to teach them something holy, he stayed where he was. And what this passage is going to do, and what I think Jesus was trying to do, was Jesus was trying to grow the faith of the people around him in this moment. He notices, again, chapter 10, he's made all these claims and people aren't buying it. It's fresh on his mind that just teaching people the right things isn't always enough. There are other ingredients to change and transformation than just having the right information. Did you know this? Did you know that you can read the Bible every day and it will never change you without other elements? Just reading the Bible is not a precursor to actually growing. It's not the only element you have to have in your life. It's a good element. It's something that I think you should do, but doing it alone, I know people who have PhDs in religion that address the Bible, and they don't believe in Jesus. They read it every day. They know more about it than any of us from an academic perspective. They still don't believe in Jesus. What else might we need? What else might Jesus have on his mind? What kind of people does he need the people around him to be so that when he leaves and he gives them the privilege and the responsibility to carry on the work of the gospel, that they're ready for it? That's the question I think Jesus is asking and providing an answer to this morning, because remember, this is mere days before he actually does go back to Jerusalem, enter triumphantly, and then get put to death. His time is extremely limited, which again kind of should wake us up. Like, why is he wasting days of time seemingly just hanging around when time is such a precious commodity to him? He's trying to help the people around him grow. That's what he says. In a little while, he says, I'm doing all of this for your benefit. That God would get glory and that you would see the glory of the Son. So, what elements of growth does Jesus talk about? The first is the role of discomfort or pain in growth. Is there anything heavy up here? This is heavy enough. Let's grab a guitar. If I wanted to, it's not plugged into anything, hopefully the wireless doesn't fall off. If I do this motion with Luke's guitar enough, I could grow my muscles, right? Theoretically, if I do any repetitive motion over and over again. Now, if I keep doing this for a while, what am I going to feel like tomorrow? sore. Right. We understand that when we make things grow, that there is often pain involved in the process. But while we understand that, we don't often think that not all pain is the same. Not all pain is equal. Think about it this way. So, a man in a mask meets you after dinner one night as you're walking back to your car in Vancouver. The man has a knife. He uses the knife to cut your abdomen open, and he leaves you unconscious on the ground and takes all of your money. What do we call that man? A mugger. Thank you very much. That's exactly the word I was thinking of. Call him a mugger. Now, if I drive myself to the hospital and a man with a mask uses a knife to cut open my abdomen and leaves me lying down and takes all my money. In Canada, he's preemptively taken my money through taxes. What do we call him? A surgeon. Pain is not always pain. You with me? You with me? There's good pain. Theoretically, if I go to the hospital and the surgeon decides that he needs to open my gut, he's trying to help me, right? The mugger is not trying to help me. The mugger is giving me bad pain. The surgeon, theoretically, is helping me experience some good pain so that on the other side, whatever was wrong with me might get healed and fixed. And in our lives, bad pain is the kind of pain that we repeat over and over and over again. Old patterns that aren't serving us anymore. But we often do that in avoidance of good pain. Again, so think about this. So summer is coming, and you have a desire to go to the beach in a t-shirt or maybe no shirt at all. And if you're young enough and unmarried, you're trying to attract people. Maybe you're just trying to make yourself feel better. Maybe you just want to look in the mirror and feel better about yourself, okay? And you go to the mirror and you hold up the gun show and you're not impressed. We're not entertained, right? Now, you have a choice. There's two kinds of pain now. The first pain is the pain that it feels like to go in front of the mirror and do this and not see much of anything at all, okay? That kind of pain we're sort of used to, right? But there's another kind of pain we could choose, which would be grabbing our dumbbells and every day making those muscles sore and doing it over and over and over again, because that kind of pain would actually have some benefit to us. The first kind of pain we've learned to live with. The second kind of pain is something that we would have to do but would have a positive result in our life. Now let me tell you something. I've noticed that some people are better at this than others. Some people are so good at avoiding pain, they've become really effective in avoiding pain for other people. We call those people enablers. Do you know any enablers in your life? Or in your world? Let me show you what it sounds like. Somebody has decided that they have a friend who's very bad at technology. And this morning should be an illustration that technology is amazing until it betrays you. That's what happened when that noise came through the PA. The computer needed a reboot. Everything was fine until we hit play, and then guess what? Technology is always amazing until it betrays you. There are some people who've been betrayed by technology so much that they've made it their mission in life to make sure that nobody else gets betrayed by technology. And so, when we inherited our church database, there were a few phone numbers that were in the database hundreds of times. You know why? because a couple of people had decided that some other people weren't able to sign up for anything digitally and had gone about the process of doing it for them. Okay? Now, it was good and well-intentioned. They were trying to avoid that person having some pain. But you know what became really interesting to me? A lot of people who were very bad at technology, when COVID hit, figured out how to use technology. Did you notice that? Did you notice how like every government thing you signed up for in COVID required you to fill out an online form? That every human contact you were able to have in COVID required you to know how to use Zoom? And all of a sudden, people who are like, I'm really bad at technology, they figured it out. Why? Because nobody saved them the pain of having to interface with the technology. And they learned something and they grew. You see the difference? Right? Some people are just trying to stop us from experiencing any kind of pain. But the problem is the human life is designed in such a way that it is better able to grow in the context of pain than almost any other way. Think about the ways that you have grown in your life as a human being. Was pain a part of the equation? Almost always. Almost always. Pain is a part of what's going on. So if you hear that story and you think, oh, I might be an enabler, stop it. Stop it. It's not helping. Help people find the way to do the thing that they need to do. Help them walk through the pain so that on the other side they would experience less pain. So on the other side, they actually would have grown. Look, it's really simple. All you need to do is become effective at naming pain correctly. Is it good or bad? If you're experiencing some bad pain and you got to walk through it, own it, and then turn it into something better, because that's what Jesus teaches Mary and Martha and the others that are onlooking as he walks them through this process. I think that Jesus saw a teachable moment. He saw a moment in which pain was going to be present. And I want to be super duper clear, because some people talk about it like it's like God gives you pain so that he can teach you something. I don't think that's the case. I think pain is a part of the world that we live in. And God is just kind enough to have found a way to redeem even human pain, to teach us things when we're in the midst of pain. So in the middle of this scenario, the women approach him, and because he loves them, he starts guiding them through a process so that they could learn something important. Jesus' followers are not getting it. They're famous for that. They're like, Jesus, why are we going back to Jerusalem? Because like yesterday they wanted to kill you. And Thomas, doubting Thomas, he gets really sarcastic with Jesus at the end. He's like, well, we might as well go and die too. They don't get what Jesus is doing at all. But in verse 17, it all starts to come together. It says this: on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, the second element for growth is often time. And I think what Jesus was doing here was he realized that there was going to be a moment in which everything came together, that he could teach the lesson that he needed to teach. Because Jewish custom has a rhythm to mourning. The mourning actually starts prior to death. There's a whole phase. And then there's a second phase that lasts 7 days, but within that 7 days of mourning, after the person has passed away, it like ramps up over the first 3 days. So Jesus arriving on the fourth day means that he arrived in the pinnacle of their mourning. And Jesus is now able to use the element of time to reinforce the lesson that he's trying to learn. Or trying to teach, There is a difference between intellectual learning and experience. And the difference is time. Our practical theology has to kind of catch up sometimes to our book theology. What do I mean by that? I mean, sometimes we think that we read something and we understand it. But life has a way of teaching. Can I just, if you're under the age of 40, can I tell you something? You're going to figure out here in the next little bit that learning happens in decades. That your 20s are going to be a different experience than your 30s. Excuse me, I wanted to skip right over that one. That your 30s are going to be different than your 40s. If you're in the midst of a learning season right now, can I just encourage you? And I hate this. Can I be totally honest? I hate this advice because I'm not a patient person in any way, shape, or form. But this is what I've come to understand. Until you have been doing what you're doing for about 10 years, just take a humble approach. Take a teachable approach. Because you will be embarrassed by the things that you said or did to people when you're 10 years on in your journey. Parents, those of you who have been on the journey for a while, what did you think about parents before you had children? Come on, be honest. Only a couple of you are giggling. Didn't know anything. That's right. My kids will never behave that way. And then they, like technology, betray you for no apparent reason at all. As you go on your journey, you realize, man, hopefully you only thought, I thought some really wicked things about parents before I had kids. And then about 10 years later, you look back and go, I feel like I have 100 apologies to write. These people don't know I owe them an apology, but I owe them an apology. There is something about the growth of time. I had a friend once who, when I was young and eager to get involved in ministry, I thought I had been serving at my church for 2 or 3 years, which when I was 24 seemed like a really, really long time. And I had started to put out some resumes and I couldn't figure out why nobody would call me back. And my friend, gently and annoyingly, he looked at me and he said, Tim, you know that it took 90 years for God to fulfill his promise to Abram, right? So what if God asked you to wait 90 years? Oh, man. All I wanted to do in that moment was punch him right in the face. And I hope it doesn't take any of us 90 years to learn lessons. But he wasn't wrong. You know, I wasn't ready. I needed time. I had capacity. I had done learning. I had some talent, I think. And in that moment, he just said, but you don't have the perspective that time brings. And people know that, and they can tell when they talk to you. Ouch. It kind of hurt, but it was good pain. I think about that conversation really often in my life. Because time has a way of repeating us and putting repeated exposure into our life to shape and mold us. And only time can do that. Sometimes God gives people miraculous insight, like depth beyond their years. We call these people the people with old souls, right? People whose wisdom goes beyond their years. And sometimes, unfortunately, if you haven't learned to let pain do its work, then you can be really old and not wise yet. But what's supposed to happen is repeated exposure to the same mistakes is supposed to teach you something. It's supposed to shape you. And the repeated exposure to small amounts and sometimes large amounts of pain in our life is supposed to shape us. It looks kind of like this. This is a picture from home. I'm from the East Coast. I grew up actually right there. You see that little jut out into the bay? The really tiny one over there? That's called Cape Belomedon. It's about 20 minutes from where I grew up. This is Hopewell Rocks in New Brunswick. I'm a Nova Scotian. They're not the same thing. And by the way, the eastern part of Canada starts after Quebec. Okay? The part that you guys call east all the time, that's central Canada. There's a center to it. And then there's a really, really Napoleonic type complex going on in the east where nobody remembers that we're there. But this is from New Brunswick. And what's fascinating about this is it's right on the coast. You can kind of walk down from these cliffs up here and go down. Has anybody ever been here before? It's a pretty common place to stop because it's fascinating. Like what you can see here is that when the tide changes, it comes up right to here. On every rock, you can see exactly where the tide usually comes. And over the course of time, the tides coming in and coming out have worn away sections of the rock. The time and repeated exposure to the tides have changed them, have changed those rocks. One of them recently fell over. I'm really glad nobody was there. I suppose that's going to happen to all of them eventually. Just like it happens to all of us eventually. See, Jesus knew that this wasn't the only time his followers were going to need to know that he was resurrection and life. Lazarus' death and subsequent resurrection is just the foreshadowing in the story of what happened on Easter weekend. And prior to this, I don't know that Jesus' followers had the repeated exposure and enough experience interfacing with this particular kind of pain to have really understood, gotten, and in fact walked through the pain of Jesus leaving the earth. I think it's really important that it was Mary and Martha who had this experience, that they were the primary characters in the story. Why? Because it was the women who went to the tomb first. And it's one of the Marys. Now there's lots of debate, but you can make the case that it's Mary Magdalene, and that Mary Magdalene and Mary of Bethany are the same. There's lots of argument about that. But let's just assume for a quick second that the side of the camp that believes those two people are the same is right, because it's that Mary that first encounters the risen Jesus. It's that Mary that he appears to first. And isn't it beautiful to think that Jesus was getting her ready for that moment in her life? In all of the confusion and all of the mess that was going on around her, in the seemingly uncaring manner in which Jesus is just like, yeah, I know, Mary, you think you need me, but I got to go to the guitar store first. No. That wasn't what Jesus was doing. Jesus was helping them walk through a kind of pain so that when they encountered it again, they'd be able to help others walk through the pain, to have the faith to get to the other side, to wait until Jesus appeared to those other people. And somebody knew, no, Jesus is resurrection and life. He does have the power over death. He can do what he promised. And in fact, he has done it. If Jesus seems uncaring in the first part of the story, just make sure you read past verse 25. Because what happens after that is that Jesus shows the depth of his human caring. It says Jesus had compassion on the people who are mourning, and he wept with them. And Jesus saying, I am resurrection and life. What we should take away from this is in all the moments in which Jesus decides to engage with us, even when life is difficult, he is faithful and he is the companion that we need in those moments. We want to repeat over and over again that this is a church where you can come as you are. If you hang around here long enough, you hear us say, come as you are, but don't stay that way. Because if you want to grow, this is what it often looks like. Come, repeated exposure. And when those moments of pain hit, here's what we believe deeply, that Jesus and his church are here to walk with you through it. Remember, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And Jesus has defeated death for all of us. So let's worship.